I'm Tony Scott with bnetTV. We are here at the LTE Asia Summit 2012 in Singapore. I am speaking with Tekelec's Mr. Houck Reed. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Excellent. For all of our viewers out there in bnetTV land, can you give us a brief overview of Tekelec and what you're doing here at the LTE Asia Summit?
Tekelec is a mobile data company. We produce products in the policy, diameter routing, and subscriber data management space. And the reason that we're here in Asia is because Asia is one of the most rapidly growing areas around the world for LTE, and we want to make sure that everybody understands that Tekelec is very focused on Asia and winning business here in Asia.
So for the layman person out there, can you explain a little bit about, without us getting too depth up front, what the differences are between SS7 and diameter when it comes to 3G networks and then 4G LTE networks?
Essentially, from the standpoint of the underlying need, they're very similar in the sense that you have signaling traffic in both cases, and you need to efficiently route that signaling traffic. Signaling traffic is very critical to whether it be a phone call or a data session setup, tear down, and the features around that in terms of what you're enabled to do, what your priority is, etc. And so they're very similar in that respect. However, in the case of data networks, the traffic is much greater, and in the case of diameter within those data networks, the functionality that's required across the network is much greater. So think of what SS7 has been done related to voice and the set of features around that. You take that with the pervasive increase in data applications and network elements associated with data, and you'll find diameters in all of those.
So bnetTV consistently covers in-depth technology conferences, and up to close to 100 of them on a yearly basis. Throughout this last year, 2012 especially, the OTT players have really come to the forefront with the amount of data that's being transmitted over the top of the network to many different fantastic new devices that have hit the marketplace. The consumer loves to consume data at a high rate. So we're getting used to that within our lifestyle, and the idea of roaming on different networks causes problems for those networks when it comes to LTE. Can you explain a little bit about that, and then how the diameter metering protocols inevitably make a play in there?
From the standpoint of roaming, has always been an issue from the standpoint whether it be a voice call or a data call, in the sense that as you move from the network that your provider has to a network that somebody else is providing, whether it be in the case of LTE, another LTE network, a 3G network, a Wi-Fi network, you're going to need to be able to be authenticated onto the network. You're going to need to have features associated with what you pay for as part of your plan that are going to be enabled and be able to go with you. So you're going to have to. So as a consequence, carriers have to be able to work with one another, and they have to do it through a standardized way so that their subscribers can roam onto each other's networks, get the features that they've paid for, and then have the appropriate billing go back and forth between the carriers.
So let's talk about what Tekelec's doing here at this particular conference. In particular, what transpired yesterday, because the signaling pre-conf day that you had was pretty outstanding. Your room was packed all day, and it's kind of new for this LTE form, and it looks like you're well positioned within the ecosystem.
Yes, I mean we're very pleased with the turnout yesterday. Again, this is the second of these signaling days that we've done in conjunction with Informa. The reason why these signaling days have started and why they're going to be continuing into some of the other regions this year as well as into next year is the industry awareness of the importance of signaling has been growing very rapidly, because signaling has been growing over three times faster than data growth, and as a consequence of that, carriers have experienced things like signaling storms, as well as the need for more robust signaling networks than what they originally anticipated. If you go back to the original standards around diameter, the assumption was when they put those standards together that everything was IP, everything would take care of itself, and what they've since found, because of the growth in that signaling traffic, which is driven by many different things, including such things as policy, and going forward as carriers look at rolling out more sophisticated policies, generate more sessions, that generates more signaling traffic. They need to have the right infrastructure in place to be able to manage that. The same thing with data traffic, unlike traditional voice traffic, which is very predictable, where you could engineer for a busy hour call. You can't do that with data traffic. It's really about managing that data traffic and knowing what to do with it when things get out of control, because you can't really over-engineer a data network. You can't over-engineer a data signaling network, because of the fact that the ability of that traffic to eventually overwhelm the network is always there. And so you have to have the right protocol in place with the right characteristics to that protocol to be able, with the right elements such as a DSR and the core of the network, to be able to manage the problems that may arise, such things as congestion, or is a big thing in terms of and any elements that are being overwhelmed by traffic due to something happening, an element being taken out, etc. Those are kind of capabilities that are needed. Authentication, security, etc. are all important things that, as that traffic increases, have to be there.
Let's talk a little bit about the some of the challenges that have existed when moving from 3G to 4G that Tekelec has really helped the ecosystem overcome.
There's been a lot of challenges for carriers moving from 3G to 4G. Probably one of the biggest challenges out there is the fact that in 3G, the policy infrastructure was relatively straightforward. Most of the use cases were fairly simple and involved a lot of work with the charging systems. Going forward into LTE, the business model really has to change with LTE, in the sense that carriers are, they're going to have something more like in the range of 80% of their use cases are going to be policy use cases are not going to involve charging. They're going to involve all network elements out there, and policy is going to become much more pervasive and going all the way out to the end devices and beyond the carrier's network, out into the OTT space, the cloud, etc. So as a consequence of that, there's a need for a much more robust policy and underlying diameter infrastructure that's going to be needed in order to support those business models.
How does the idea of small cells, whether macro, pico, femto, however that may come about, how does the idea of small cells and Wi-Fi offload and onload work within the diameter arena, and are the operators going to be able to manage that policy effectively as they roll out their network?
The simple answer to that is that yes, they're going to be able to. They're going to have to put the right things in place in terms of how they manage the policies around doing essentially seamless roaming between Wi-Fi and their LTE network. So moving from cell to cell is something that's well understood how to do that. It generates more signaling traffic when you continue to roam around from cell to cell, mostly in the RAM, but also some diameter signaling, given the fact that that can impact your sessions. But from the standpoint of going from Wi-Fi to LTE, that's a challenge that carriers have got to understand, because of the fact that when they get into areas where you have large concentrations of subscribers in low mobility, such as say a sporting stadium during a game, especially when you don't have that every day, it's much more cost effective to leverage a Wi-Fi network to be able to provide that surge in capacity when you need it, as opposed to building out an LTE network that's only going to be used once a week. And so, but at the same time, you have subscribers. They have different expectations. There's different types of subscribers, different qualities of service, and so you're going to want to be able to manage that. You're going to make sure that your subscribers can seamlessly roam, maintain state of their sessions as they go in and out of that Wi-Fi network. Have that, and then some subscribers you may choose not to have onto that network because you want to make sure that you're managing their quality of service overall. Others, for certain applications, they may stay on the LTE network for calls, for such things as calls that want to have a higher quality of service. but when they start downloading applications, you roll them over onto the Wi-Fi service, or their service plan may be that whenever there's Wi-Fi available, that they roll right onto Wi-Fi. But the key thing is going to be is essentially needs to be transparent to an end user. They need to have seamless authentication so that they're not always looking at little screens popping up asking if they want to jump onto Wi-Fi networks, and they're going to need to maintain whatever it is that they're doing uninterrupted as they roll in and out of those.
So does that, in your professional opinion, is that going to slow down the rollout of LTE networks globally? Are operators going to stop for a moment, think about the re-architecture, think about how the self-optimizing networks inevitably are going to follow through when it comes to policy and security, and therefore we've got maybe a little bit of time on our hands?
I think that there's a couple things there. One is that carriers we've seen a big change over the last year from carriers not appreciating the need for the underlying core diameter network and putting that in place from day one, thinking that they could wait until their traffic grew, to where we've seen around the world that in fact carriers have shown that that is not the case based on some problems that they've had, that they need to put that in place at the beginning. And so we're seeing most carriers these days are putting that in place, which once that diameter network is in place, then that allows you to roll new policies into that very effectively, so that because you've got the underlying signaling infrastructure to support it. I don't think anybody's going to slow down because of it. What the biggest hurdles for carriers these days in terms of rolling out an LTE network and creating monetization opportunities out of it beyond the basic data access is not technology. The technology is going to be there in time so that when the business models are worked out between carriers and content providers and ways that they can connect those subscribers with the content that they want and revenue models that make sense for everybody, the technology will be there, I think, well in advance of that.
Do you think that, this is my final question to you here, the iPhone 5 just announced, and the pre-orders were, I think, done within a couple hours. It was extremely overwhelming for the entire globe. It really kind of brings LTE to the forefront. Apple does a fantastic job in making sure that they're getting a lot of press surrounding a device. LTE has obviously been in the ecosystem for quite a long time, but again, Apple does a really good job of making the consumer aware of it. Now, that being said, and we've just sort of talked about it's not really going to slow the operators down, but does that mean that sort of this next 12 months we're going to see sort of an increase of operators running to Tekelec's door and saying, hey, wait, you know what, we've got these devices that are now really coming online, the consumer's going to be consuming more data at a faster pace, we need your help?
Well, we've already seen that. I mean, we've seen an increase. In fact, our market projections show that the market increasing at an increasing rate for the foreseeable future. Things like the iPhone 5 do nothing but drive an increase in the growth of the marketplace. And again, one of the things that's important to remember with the iPhone 5 is it's a good example of the fact that it's actually it's becoming less the device than it is the ecosystem that device is connected to. And so the more pervasive that ecosystem is, the more that a subscriber can do within that ecosystem, the more that it can do more things in its life. A person only has so many hours in a day to do things. And so the more opportunity as an operator has to get them to use that phone for more things that they do. If you look into the future, everything from doing your banking to starting your car, you use that device more and more and more. And so as a consequence of that, we're seeing that, and Apple is a great example of how once you establish an ecosystem and you give devices, every device, as it adds more features, functionality, increases stickiness, increases the opportunity for application developers to put more stuff out there because it's got more horsepower, it's got more memory, etc. And so all of these things contribute to absolutely. It just goes on and on.
More policy, more management, more.
Exactly, that increasing at an increasing rate, right. Which is exactly what we like to see.
Excellent. You are extremely knowledgeable in your area. I appreciate the conversation. Tekelec is well positioned within the ecosystem for fantastic growth. I wish you some great future success. I hope we get a chance for an update again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
I've been speaking with Mr. Houck Reed here of Tekelec here at the LTE Asia Summit 2012 in Singapore, and I am Tony Sklar with bnetTV.